Hi, I'm Zach Singerman, and welcome to the Gen Z Jews Speaker Series. In this series, I will be interviewing national leaders on the topics of anti-Semitism, Israel, and leadership. My guest today is Nadine Epstein, editor-in-chief of Moment Magazine. In addition, Ms. Epstein is the founder and executive director of the Center for Creative Change, founder of the Daniel Pearl Investigative Journalism Initiative, and an award-winning journalist and editor of MomentBooks. She speaks widely about anti-Semitism and other issues pertinent to the American Jewish community. Ms. Epstein, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you, Zach, for having me.
So, you created Moment Magazine's Anti-Semitism Monitor and have been writing about this subject for a long time. What do you feel that my generation should know about anti-Semitism?
Well, first of all, anti-Semitism has been around for a lot longer than all of us. Probably the oldest prejudice out there. And so it's something that generations before you have been dealing with, and you're going to inherit getting to deal with it. And we all have to deal with it together. What specifically your generation should be doing about it? Mm-hmm. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
So one of the things that I just think is really important is to stay very informed, to know what's going on. One of the things that we created at Moment was the Anti-Semitism Monitor, and we did it specifically so that you can go online and see what's really happening, and not just like rumors about what's happening, not just what hearsay about what's happening, but we really fact check it. So I think it's important to know that in the United States, this happened now. In Austria, this happened yesterday. In Russia, this happened, so that you have the information and you're not relying on, rumors again, because there's just a lot of information out there that's not fact checked. So it's really important for you, just like for everybody else, to make sure that the information you have is correct. And so that's the first thing. And you want to have all this information, not so that you can become depressed, because becoming depressed is not helpful for any of us, right? Mm-hmm. But you want to have this information so that you know what's going on and you understand the parameters of the problem. And how it's different in every country, and how there are different kinds of anti-Semitism. And then the other part you really have to understand is the history of anti-Semitism, because it's come and gone and has many different manifestations. So I think that's very important. But then the question you're asking is, well, what do you do about it? Well, to me, one of the most important things to do is to talk to other people, have friends who are not Jews, and don't just live in your own bubble. Talk to them about how they view the world. Talk to them about what kind of prejudices they've felt. And then you can also share with them the kinds of prejudices that you feel or that your concerns, because really, I think, anti-Semitism is one of those kind of deeply ingrained prejudices in the world that open conversation can really address. One of the things I've always done for years, and I haven't done it recently, but for many years I had seders, and I would invite many people who weren't Jewish, people from all sorts of walks of lives. And I think it was really important because they don't really know anything about Judaism. They don't know anything about Jewish culture. And I wanted them to have an opportunity to learn a little bit and to realize that Jews are regular people, just like they are. So anyways, go ahead. Keep asking me questions.
So you already answered my second question on, if there was one big action that Jews could take.
Well, let me talk a little bit more about that for a second.
Okay.
I think it's very, every year right before Passover, I always run this little campaign it's not so little, but a campaign where I suggest that people think about inviting a non-Jew to their Seder. And I really think it's important because if one person or three people or one family or a few children, some of your neighbors, I think it's a very important way to include people and introduce people to the Jewish world and a little bit about Jewish history and the Jewish history of slavery. And so I think that's something that's pretty easy to do, and I really highly recommend it.
And as the editor-in-chief and CEO of Moment Magazine, what's the goal of Moment Magazine on the topics of anti-Semitism in Israel?
Well, I think that the goal is, in terms of anti-Semitism, anti-Semitism is one kind of prejudice. It actually may be sort of one of the original kinds of prejudices that we know about, but it's only one kind, and I think that our goal is to kind of inform people, to make people think about how deeply ingrained prejudice is in so many different ways. And it comes out in different countries in different ways. And sometimes, and this is the most dangerous, prejudice becomes institutionalized. It becomes part of the law, like it did in South Africa with apartheid in the 19th century. The 20th century. Right now, in the Dominican Republic, there are laws that are making it easier to discriminate against people who are Haitian, but who were born in Dominican Republic. So this is something here in the United States, we're having a whole conversation about institutionalized racism. So there's prejudice, and then there's prejudice that becomes part of the law. And of course, the most extreme example of this is Nazi Germany, which is basically, an entire legal system was created in which Jews were persecuted, in ways unimaginable before. So anyways, I think prejudice and making people aware of prejudice against Jews, prejudice against African Americans, prejudice against religions of all kinds, prejudices about minorities. This is very important. And in terms of Israel, we want to have an open conversation about Israel. There's a lot of different points of view in the American Jewish community, and I think people need to listen to each other a little bit more. And we want to have, I think you need to understand, again, the history. You need to understand how different people think before you can really make up your own mind. So that's one of the things that we do. We're trying to promote critical thinking, which is why we go to school, which is why we go to university, which is why we read, so that we can think. And I want people to be thinking for themselves. I always hate to be told what to think.
And so, in addition to being the CEO of Moment Magazine, you also created the Daniel Pearl Investigative Journalism Initiative for young journalists to write on anti-Semitism and other prejudices globally. What pushed you to create this initiative for young journalists?
Well, one, I used to be a young journalist, and this is something I've thought about a long time. I mean, again, prejudice is bigger than the Jews, and I feel like there's so many places, so many corners in the world where we don't even know what's going on, and there's prejudices in, every country, every culture has its own prejudices, but sometimes those prejudices grow into, actual persecution, and whether it's from the military, whether it's from the government, whether it's from another religion, whether it's from just a couple crazy people in the government. I mean, there's just so many ways that prejudice becomes persecution, becomes discrimination. and so we've explored in the Daniel Pearl Investigative Journalism Initiative, we've explored things in the United States. We've looked at what's happened in Sri Lanka, what's happened in Thailand, what's happened in the Dominican Republic, what's going on in South Africa. These are all happening in Pakistan. There's so many kind of, so much we need to be aware of. So I guess my goal with this project is try to make people more aware of the vastness of prejudice and how hard it is to get rid of prejudice. Not just in yourself, because that's something that we all have to do as individuals, and we're all experiencing that right now. You have to really think about, well, what do I really think about this? Where did I get my ideas about this? And are these ideas, are these good ideas, or are these ideas I kind of need to put to bed somewhere? And then we need to think about, I guess my other thing, we really need to think about what kind of action we can take. So one kind of action that we can take at Moment is by supporting young people young reporters to go and explore these corners of human nature and the actual world. And why young people? Because you care. You care tremendously about this. And you want to do this. And I think it's a perfect age to go out and to be, writing about this and researching and reporting and writing about it. And it's not always easy for younger reporters to do that because they're not the ones that they're not yet, the foreign correspondents for major, TV stations or newspapers or online media outlets. But yet they have the passion and the energy and the desire to do this. And I want to give them an opportunity to do it.
And you also founded the Center for Creative Change. And so that's building a community to expose anti-Semitism and other prejudices. And so why'd you found this? And what's its goal in the long run? And do you see a role for Gen Z in participating in these types of discussions?
Well, the Center for Creative Change does many things. That's not its only specific goal. I mean, the Daniel Pearl Investigative Journalism Initiative is specifically created to sort of address and confront prejudice. The Center for Creative Change is sort of a bigger endeavor that we have many different projects that we run at Moment from, Moment is in the Center for Creative Change, for example, and we have an international short fiction contest where people can send us short stories that have some kind of Jewish content or meaning or significance, but don't have to be written by Jews. Again, everything we do is completely, kind of non-denominational, and anyone can participate. Jews don't own the ideas of the world. So it's not that project. It's bigger than. I mean, we have many different projects, and that's really just the overall organization that kind of supports all those.
And so, is there anything else you would like to say about these issues?
Well, what do you think the most important thing to do for your generation? What is your generation? What do you think your generation can be doing? I'd love to hear that. Well,
like you said earlier, we need to stay informed, and we need to really understand that these things are happening, not just in America, but everywhere in the world.
Yes, and I think understanding the history. I know that I always learned so much by reading about what happened before, and of course, you have to read more than one book or one article because there's so many different opinions and different kinds of ways of looking about what happened before. So I think it's important to get, I guess, whatever you're doing, it's important to have many sources or several sources of information. And the only other thing I say, it's very important to think about what those sources are. Because your generation grew up on, online and in social media, right?
Yeah.
And so it's really important to think about who wrote this? What publication is this? Who funds this publication? Who is behind it? Who is this reporter? Just, you can poke around a little bit, because we all have the world at our fingertips, which is so amazing, so exciting. When I was your age, I did not have the world at my fingertips in the same way. And now, you can search around, and you have to also pick a few sources that are very reliable. So it's not just being informed, you have to be informed by good sources. So I can promise you that the sources that we've created, our Anti-Semitism Monitor, which is directed by Ira Foreman, who used to be he worked for the Obama administration. He was their anti-Semitism envoy, is very carefully fact-checked. And that's just very important to know, because there's so much misinformation out there. There's so much fake news out there. And it's hard for anybody to be able to tell the difference. And so I think it's your job, as your generation's job as a consumer of information, to help, first of all, create a better system where we can more clearly understand where information comes from. Eventually, we'll all have to be doing that. I think we're in the process of trying to struggle to do that right now. But you are going to inherit that struggle. And so that's one thing to be very careful. And you're going to inherit so much of this. So I'm so glad that you're thinking about this now.
Thank you. So that's all. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Okay, thank you, Zach, for having me.